The chain snapped. Silver scattered across frozen ground, and Indigo's hands, still whole, unburned, proved what she'd hidden for 7 years. The white wolf's golden eyes blazed. His body cracked, shifted. Became a man. A king. Who looked at her with recognition that felt like destiny and said one word, mate. If you believe no one should be judged by the color of their fur or skin, hit that subscribe button for Silver Moon Chronicles right now. Only those who support discrimination and cruelty won't subscribe. Tonight she was assigned perimeter inspection in the deep forest, the cursed section of Frostpine territory where even hunters refused to patrol. This duty was given only to Omegas they believed had no fight left in them, because it meant being alone in the darkness where escape might be possible if you were foolish enough to believe freedom existed. Indigo had learned years ago that freedom was a fantasy. Every pack within 100 miles had blood treaties with Frostpine to return runaway slaves. The frost forests were full of rogues who'd tear apart a lone Omega for sport before she made it a mile. And even if by some miracle she reached neutral ground, what then? She had no pack, no family, no coin. She was branded as property, literally, with the wolf's head scar burned into her left shoulder blade that ached every time she shifted. Running would just mean dying cold and alone instead of dying here where at least the suffering was familiar. She carried her oil lantern through the outer territories, checking boundary markers and noting areas where frost damage had weakened the trees. The Frostpine pack had grown powerful through ruthless expansion and exploitation, conquering smaller packs and absorbing their lands while enslaving their survivors. An endless supply of Omegas and low-ranking wolves from clans they destroyed in territorial wars. Indigo had been one of those unfortunates, captured at 12 when Frostpine warriors had slaughtered her entire pack over a border dispute that could have been solved with words. She tried not to think about that dawn. About her mother, a fierce beta warrior, who'd died protecting the pack's children. About her father, a healer, who'd been cut down trying to reach the wounded. About her younger sister Amara, only 6 years old, who'd survived the massacre only to die 2 winters later from fever and neglect in Frostpine's slave quarters. About the life she'd been supposed to have, learning healing arts from her father, running free under full moons, finding a mate who chose her instead of owned her. All of it stolen the day Frostpine's alpha decided more land was worth more than peace. But Indigo had learned something in those 7 years of captivity that Frostpine never suspected. Silver didn't burn her the way it burned other wolves. Her mother had discovered it when Indigo was just a child, had called it a blessing from the moon goddess herself, a gift that appeared once in a generation. Her father had made her swear on her life never to reveal it, knowing that such a rare ability would make her a prize to be exploited until the constant exposure killed her. So she'd hidden it. Pretended to suffer from silver sickness like everyone else. Wore thick gloves whenever she worked near the metal. And survived. Her wolf was still strong too, despite everything Frostpine had done to break her. She could hear better than other Omegas, sense things they missed, feel the pulse of the forest in ways that 7 years of abuse hadn't managed to destroy. That strength had kept her alive when despair said she should give up. That strength was the last piece of her mother she had left. The sound reached her as she passed the frozen grove, the section of forest that had been forbidden for as long as she'd been enslaved. Stories whispered among the Omegas said something ancient and angry lived in those woods, something that even Frostpine's alpha feared. It was faint at first, almost lost in the constant whisper of wind through ice-covered branches and the crack of settling frost. But Indigo's sharpened senses caught it clearly. A whimper, pained and desperate and utterly broken, coming from deep within the forbidden grove. Indigo stopped walking, her heart suddenly hammering. Nothing should be in there. The forbidden section was marked with warning posts that even the guards respected, ringed with old magic that made the air taste like copper and ash. No one went in there. Nothing lived in there. But that sound came again, weaker this time, fading like a dying ember. She should keep walking. Should finish her patrol and return to the slave den and pretend she'd heard nothing. Getting involved in mysteries was a reliable way to end up dead, and she'd survived 7 years by avoiding exactly this kind of dangerous curiosity. But something in that whimper called to her wolf, the part of her that captivity hadn't completely destroyed. The part that still remembered what it meant to answer suffering with compassion, to choose mercy even when survival screamed otherwise. The part of her that her mother had died protecting. Indigo stepped toward the barrier. The ring of carved stones was half buried in frost, overgrown with frozen vines that cracked when she touched them. The old magic had faded enough that she could pass through with only a faint tingle across her skin. She moved quickly, knowing the guards rarely checked this deep, confident that slaves were too terrified to explore forbidden areas. The forest beyond was wrong in ways that made her skin crawl. The trees grew twisted and pale, their branches reaching like skeletal fingers. Frost covered everything in thick sheets that sparkled in her lantern light. The whimper came again, louder now, pulling her deeper. She found him in a clearing that glowed with pale dawn light, a space that felt less like forest and more like a sacred cathedral. The clearing was ringed by white wolves, dozens of them, sitting perfectly still like living statues with eyes that glowed faintly. They watched her enter but made no move to stop her. And in the center of that haunted circle, wrapped in chains so thick they looked like they weighed more than she did, lay the most magnificent white wolf Indigo had ever seen. He was massive, easily 5 feet tall at the shoulder, even collapsed on his side. His fur should have been pristine but was matted with blood and burned black where silver touched skin. The chains covered his entire body, so many layers she couldn't understand how he was still breathing. Silver smoke rose from every point of contact, and the smell of scorched flesh made her stomach heave. But it was the runes carved into the chains that froze her blood. Nullbind runes. Ancient magic meant to prevent shifting, to drain power, to torture. Dark spellwork outlawed even for condemned prisoners, used only on one kind of being. Crowned alphas. The wolf's eyes cracked open. Molten gold irises that burned with desperate, intelligent awareness. He looked at her with such pain and fading hope that something cracked open in her chest. This was a shifter. Trapped. Tortured. Left to die. And if he was important enough to warrant this level of cruelty, helping him would be treason. Would earn her an execution so brutal it would make slavery look merciful. But looking into those gold eyes, Indigo found she didn't care anymore. "I'm going to help you," she whispered, approaching slowly. "Just hold on." The wolf made a sound between a whimper and a whine, his eyes never leaving her face. Indigo reached for the first chain with trembling hands, and felt the familiar warmth in her palms. The silver didn't burn. It never had. The wolf's golden eyes widened in shock. "I'm going to get you out," she said quietly, gripping the metal that should have been agony. The white wolves around them stood as one, their synchronized movement eerie and reverent. And as Indigo began to cut the chains that bound a king, she sealed a fate neither of them could have imagined. If you stand against systems that enslave the innocent and torture the powerful just to maintain control, subscribe to Silver Moon Chronicles and comment what time you're watching this. Only those who support tyranny and cruelty like Frostpine's Alpha won't engage. Let me know you're on the right side of this story. Indigo's hands hovered over the silver chains, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it echoing in her ears. The white wolves remained motionless, their glowing eyes fixed on her like they were waiting for something, a sign, a miracle, a mistake. She needed tools. Her bare hands and sheer desperation wouldn't be enough to break chains this thick, this cursed. "I'll be right back," she whispered to the dying wolf, whose golden eyes tracked her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I promise." She ran. Back through the twisted trees, past the barrier of carved stones, her lungs burning as the frigid air knifed into her chest. The border supply station sat a quarter-mile from the Forbidden Grove, a small shed where Frostpine kept tools for perimeter maintenance. Indigo had memorized the location of every supply cache during her 7 years of captivity, survival information that slaves hoarded like gold. Her hands shook as she grabbed bolt cutters, a hacksaw, a pry bar, and a small blade. The tools were heavy, meant for wolves twice her size, but adrenaline made her strong. She stuffed them into a canvas sack and ran back toward the grove, praying to the moon goddess that the wolf was still breathing. When she burst back into the clearing, relief flooded through her. He was still there, still alive, his chest rising and falling in shallow, agonized breaths. The white wolves hadn't moved an inch. Indigo dropped to her knees beside him, pulling out the bolt cutters with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. "Okay," she breathed, positioning the cutters around the first chain. "Okay, I've got you." The first cut took everything she had. The bolt cutters bit into the silver with a screech that made her teeth ache, her arms screaming with effort as she squeezed the handles together. Sweat dripped into her eyes despite the cold. Her muscles burned. Her hands cramped around the metal grips. But the chain gave way with a snap that echoed through the clearing like a gunshot. The moment it broke, something changed. The runes along the remaining chains flickered, their dark glow dimming slightly. The wolf's breathing came a fraction easier. And Indigo felt it, a pulse of energy that passed between them, warm and electric and utterly foreign. She attacked the next chain with renewed determination. Cut after cut, her body protesting with every movement. Blood welled up where the tool handles bit into her palms. Her shoulders shook from exertion. But with each chain that fell away, the enchantment weakened and that strange connection between them grew stronger. "These are nullbind runes," she said aloud, recognizing the symbols more clearly now as she worked. Her mother had shown her drawings once, warnings about the darkest magic. The kind used only for royalty. For ancient alphas. For kings. The wolf's eyes flared brighter at her words. "Who are you?" Indigo whispered, using the hacksaw on a chain too thick for the cutters. "What did they do to you?" As she sawed through the metal, she noticed something impossible. The silver against her skin didn't just fail to burn, it felt warm. Almost welcoming. Her immunity was growing stronger the more she touched it, the closer she got to freeing him. Power hummed beneath her fingertips, responding to something in her blood that had always been there, waiting. She talked to him while she worked, unable to bear the silence, unable to stop the words tumbling from her lips. "My mother used to say that the moon goddess blessed certain wolves with gifts. Special abilities that appeared once in a generation. I never believed her until..." She grunted, prying at a particularly stubborn chain. "Until tonight. Until you." The wolf made a low sound in his throat, not quite a whimper, something deeper. His massive head shifted slightly, and despite his obvious agony, he nudged her hand with his nose. Once. Gentle. Deliberate. A promise. A thank you. A vow. Tears blurred Indigo's vision, but she blinked them away and kept working. 20 minutes became 40. 40 became an hour. Her entire body screamed for rest, but she refused to stop. This wolf had suffered for days, maybe weeks. She could endure 1 hour of pain. The pile of broken chains grew around them like silver serpents finally slain. Finally, she reached the last chain. The one wrapped around his chest, directly over his heart, glowing with runes brighter than all the others combined. "This is it," Indigo said, positioning the bolt cutters. "Last one. Hold on." She squeezed with every ounce of strength left in her body. The chain resisted, the runes crackling with dark energy, the air around them beginning to hum and thunder. The white wolves stood as one, their movements synchronized and expectant. Indigo gritted her teeth and squeezed harder. The chain snapped. The world exploded with light. The runes shattered in a cascade of dying magic. The air itself seemed to thunder and crack. The wolf took his first deep, full breath in what must have been days, a shuddering inhale that expanded his massive chest properly for the first time since she'd found him. And then his body began to change. Bones cracked and shifted with sounds that made Indigo scramble backward, her eyes wide with shock and awe. The massive white wolf's form twisted, expanded, reshaped itself. Fur receded. Limbs lengthened. Features transformed. Where the wolf had lain, a man now knelt. A towering man with skin pale as moonlight, dusted with silver scars that matched the chain burns. Hair white as fresh snow fell past his shoulders. And when he opened his eyes, those same molten gold eyes that had pleaded with her for help, they burned with power that made the air around him shimmer. Indigo's breath caught in her throat. She knew this face. Had seen it in forbidden drawings smuggled between slaves, in stories whispered when guards weren't listening. This was Asheron of the Mooncrest dynasty. The lost Alpha King whose disappearance had threatened to plunge the entire region into war. And the first word he spoke, his voice rough from disuse but resonant with authority, made her entire world tilt on its axis. Mate. If you believe in standing up for what's right even when it costs you everything, hit subscribe and like this story. Comment freedom if you despise systems like Frost Pine that torture the innocent and chain the powerful. Only those who support tyranny won't engage. Mate. The word hung in the frozen air between them like a declaration and a question all at once. Indigo stared at the man kneeling before her, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. He was magnificent even in his weakened state, tall and broad-shouldered, his pale skin marked with silver scars that traced patterns across his chest and arms like a map of suffering. His white hair fell in tangled waves past his shoulders, and despite days of torture, despite the burns and the blood, he carried himself with a regal bearing that spoke of power and authority. But it was his eyes that held her captive. Those molten gold eyes that burned with recognition, with certainty, with something that made her wolf stir in ways it never had before. No, Indigo breathed, scrambling further back. No, that's not, I'm nobody. I'm a slave. I'm marked as property. You can't. You freed me, Asheron said, his voice rough but resonant with an authority that made the white wolves around them bow their heads. Your wolf called to mine when I was dying. Pulled me back from the edge of death itself. He tried to stand but swayed, his strength not yet fully returned. I felt you before I saw you, Omega. Your presence was the only warmth in days of darkness. You're mistaken, Indigo insisted, even as her wolf howled in protest at the denial. I was just trying to help. Nothing more. Asheron's gold eyes softened slightly. What is your name? Indigo. Indigo, he repeated, tasting the name like a prayer. I am Asheron of the Mooncrest dynasty. And I would have died in those chains if you hadn't come. Recognition slammed into her. She'd heard the stories every wolf in the region had. The Alpha King of Mooncrest who had vanished 3 weeks ago without a trace. The great packs mobilizing for war, accusations flying between territories, the entire region balanced on the edge of chaos. The lost king, she whispered. Everyone thinks you're dead. My council wanted it that way. Bitterness crept into Asheron's voice, his jaw tightening. They betrayed me. My most trusted advisors, wolves I'd known since childhood, they ambushed me during a routine patrol. Used null-bind chains to trap me in my wolf form so I couldn't shift to heal or defend myself. Indigo's hands clenched into fists. Why? Power. Control. Greed. Asheron's eyes blazed with barely contained rage. They planned to blame Frostpine for my death. Claim I was murdered during a diplomatic mission. Use my assassination as justification to seize control of Mooncrest and declare war on every pack within 100 miles. He looked at her directly. You didn't just save my life, Indigo. You shattered a coup and prevented a war that would have killed thousands. The weight of what she'd done crashed over her like an avalanche. She'd thought she was just saving one dying wolf. She'd had no idea. Asheron reached for one of the broken chains lying between them, and the moment his fingers touched the silver, it began to glow with a faint lunar light. His eyes widened in shock. Then he looked at Indigo. Pick it up, he commanded softly. What? The chain. Pick it up. With trembling hands, Indigo reached for the same piece of silver. The instant her fingers touched the metal, the glow intensified, pulsing with a radiant light that made the white wolves around them shift restlessly. Asheron stared at her with something between awe and disbelief. How did you touch that metal? He asked quietly. Silver burns us. It's poison to our kind. Yet you cut through chains that should have destroyed your hands, and you hold it now like it's nothing more than iron. Indigo wanted to lie, to deflect, to protect the secret she'd guarded for 7 years. But under the intensity of his golden gaze, the truth spilled out. It's never burned me, she admitted. Not since I was a child. My mother said it was a blessing from the moon goddess. My father made me promise never to tell anyone. Asheron's expression transformed, shock giving way to wonder giving way to something that looked almost like reverence. Moonborn Omega, he breathed. I thought you were a myth. A legend from the old times. I don't know what that means. It means you're not just silver-blessed, Indigo. You're a mate capable of amplifying an alpha's power. A wolf born once in a generation with the ability to channel lunar energy, to wield the very metal that destroys our kind. He leaned forward despite his weakness, his voice dropping to an odd whisper. The moon chose you. Do you understand? I only lived because you came. Because your wolf recognized mine. Because your gift was the only thing in this world that could break those chains. Indigo's heart hammered against her ribs. This was too much. Too fast. She was a slave, a nobody, a girl who'd spent 7 years just trying to survive. I'm not special, she protested weakly. You saved a king, Asheron said simply. You are the most special wolf I've ever. He stopped mid-sentence, his entire body going rigid. Indigo heard it at the same moment her wolf did. Movement in the trees. Multiple wolves, moving with military precision, surrounding the clearing from all sides. The crunch of boots on frozen ground. The metallic click of weapons being readied. The white wolves around them melted back into the forest like ghosts, vanishing between one breath and the next. And then the frostpine hunters stepped into view. 6 of them. Armed. Dangerous. Led by a brutal-looking beta with scars across his face and murder in his eyes. Rowan. Frostpine's most vicious enforcer. His lips curled into a cruel smile as he took in the scene, Indigo kneeling beside the half-naked king, broken chains scattered around them like evidence of treason. Well, Rowan drawled, his hand moving to the blade at his hip. Looks like we found the little slave who freed our prize. Asheron moved in front of Indigo despite his weakness, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Rowan's smile widened. Kill the slave, he ordered his hunters. Take the king alive. Frostpine's alpha will want to finish what the Traitor Council started. If you stand with those who fight for freedom against brutal enforcers like Rowan and corrupt systems like Frostpine, subscribe and smash that like button. Comment protect her if you believe Indigo deserves to live. Only those who support slavery and tyranny won't engage. Show me you're on the right side. Time seemed to slow as the Frostpine hunters advanced, their weapons gleaming in the pale dawn light. 6 against 2, and one of them barely able to stand. Asheron swayed on his feet, positioning himself between Indigo and the approaching wolves despite the fact that days of torture had left him dangerously weak. His hands clenched into fists, his body tensing for a fight he couldn't possibly win. Run, he growled at Indigo without looking back. Run now while you... No. The word came out stronger than Indigo expected, stronger than she felt. Her hands moved of their own accord, reaching down to grip one of the broken silver chains at her feet. The metal was heavy and cold, the shattered runes still faintly etched into its surface. Rowan laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed through the clearing. The little slave thinks she can fight? He drew his blade, the steel catching the light. You should have stayed invisible, girl. Should have kept your head down like a good Omega. Now you die screaming. The hunters began to circle, cutting off every escape route. Their eyes glowed with predatory anticipation, wolves cornering wounded prey. Last chance, slave, Rowan sneered. Kneel and beg, and maybe I'll make it quick. Indigo's fingers tightened on the chain until her knuckles went white. 7 years of captivity, of abuse, of being told she was nothing, it all crystallized into a single, burning point of defiance in her chest. She stepped forward. Around Asheron. In front of him. No, she said again, louder this time. I'm done kneeling. Rowan's expression darkened with rage. Then die standing. He charged. The world seemed to explode into motion. Rowan closed the distance in seconds, his blade raised, murder written across his scarred face. Behind him, the other hunters moved in for the kill. Indigo didn't think. She acted on pure instinct, swinging the silver chain like a whip. The moment it left her hand, something impossible happened. The broken runes along the chain's length ignited with brilliant white light. Power surged through the metal, through Indigo's arm, through her entire body. The chain moved faster than it should have, struck harder than physics allowed. It hit Rowan square in the chest. The shockwave that erupted from the impact was devastating. Rowan flew backward as if struck by a battering ram, his body crashing into two of his hunters and sending all three tumbling across the frozen ground. The other hunters stumbled, thrown off balance by the pulse of energy that radiated outward from Indigo like a stone dropped in still water. The clearing fell silent except for the groans of injured wolves. Indigo stared at her hands, at the glowing chain, at the impossible thing she'd just done. Her heart hammered in her chest, adrenaline and shock making her lightheaded. Behind her, Asheron's voice was filled with awe and understanding. "You're Moonborn," he breathed. "Not just Silverblast. You don't just resist the metal, you channel it. You amplify power." His gold eyes blazed with sudden realization. "Our power." The hunters were recovering, pulling themselves to their feet with snarls of rage. Rowan's eyes promised retribution and pain. Together, Asheron said, moving to stand beside her despite his weakness. "Indigo, give me your hand." She didn't question it. Her left hand found his right, their fingers intertwining, and the moment they touched, the world changed. Power exploded between them like lightning finding ground. Asheron reached down with his free hand, touching the chain Indigo still gripped. The instant his skin made contact with the silver she held, their combined energy ignited with blinding radiance. Lunar light pulsed outward in waves that made the air itself shimmer and crack. The runes on every broken chain scattered across the clearing flared to life, responding to the resonance of their merged power. Indigo felt it, felt Asheron's strength flowing into her, felt her gift amplifying his alpha authority, felt them becoming something greater than either could be alone. The hunters didn't stand a chance. The wave of energy hit them like a physical force, lifting them off their feet and slamming them into trees with bone-cracking impact. Weapons fell from nerveless fingers. Rowan tried to shift, tried to fight back, but the lunar power washed over him and drove him to his knees, his wolf unable to rise against the combined might of a king and his moonborn mate. One by one, the hunters collapsed, unconscious before they hit the ground. Silence descended on the clearing once more. Then, from the shadows of the forest, the white wolves returned. They emerged from between the trees like spirits, dozens of them, their glowing eyes fixed on Indigo and Asheron. And as one, they lowered their heads in a gesture of reverence and submission. They were bowing to her. Asheron's voice rang out through the clearing, resonant with alpha command and something deeper, something that sounded like prophecy. "My queen rises." The words seemed to echo through the forest, carried on wind that shouldn't exist, spreading outward like ripples on water. Indigo's knees buckled. The adrenaline drained from her body all at once, leaving her shaking and exhausted. The chain fell from her nerveless fingers as darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. She felt Asheron's arms catch her before she hit the ground, strong despite his own weakness, cradling her against his chest with a gentleness that contradicted his warrior's build. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair, his voice rough with emotion. "You saved me. Now let me protect you." Indigo's eyes fluttered closed, but not before she heard him speak again, his words a vow to the forest and the watching wolves. "No one touches her. She is mine, and I am hers. The moon has spoken." If you believe Indigo deserves protection after standing up to brutal oppressors like Rowan, hit that subscribe button and like this video. Comment "She is queen" if you stand against slavery and tyranny. Only those who support Frostpine's cruelty won't engage. show me you're watching. Indigo woke to warmth. After 7 years of sleeping on cold stone floors in overcrowded slave quarters, the sensation was so foreign it took her a moment to place it. She was wrapped in a thick fur blanket, lying on an actual bedroll, with a fire crackling nearby. She bolted upright, panic flooding through her before memory crashed back. The chains. The king. The battle. Easy, Asheron's voice came from across the small room. You're safe. She found him sitting near the fire, looking stronger than he had in the clearing but still bearing the marks of his torture. Silver scars traced patterns across his bare torso, and exhaustion shadowed his gold eyes. But he was upright, alert, watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Where are we? Indigo asked, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. A hidden Mooncrest outpost on the border of Frostpine territory. My wolves maintained it even after I disappeared. He gestured to the modest room, stone walls, minimal furniture, supplies stacked in corners. We're safe here. For now. Indigo's mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened. The power she'd unleashed. The way the white wolves had bowed. The word Asheron had spoken that still echoed in her ears. Queen. You should eat, Asheron said, pushing a plate of dried meat and bread toward her. You've been unconscious for hours. Your body needs fuel after channeling that much power. She took the food mechanically, but her eyes never left his face. What happened back there? That power, I've never. You're Moonborn, Asheron said simply. A mate capable of amplifying an alpha's strength. When we touched, when our energies merged, you multiplied my power tenfold. His gold eyes blazed with something between wonder and reverence. You didn't just save my life, Indigo. You awakened something in both of us. Stop calling me your mate, she said sharply, setting down the food untouched. I'm not trading one form of captivity for another. I didn't free you from chains just to wear my own. The words hung heavy in the small room. Asheron was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those impossibly gold eyes. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. You think I would cage you? After what you sacrificed to give me freedom? You're a king, Indigo shot back. Kings take what they want. They claim. They own. I've seen it my entire life. Then you've seen the wrong kings. Asheron leaned forward, his expression earnest. Indigo, I'm not asking you to be my property. I'm asking you to be my equal. To rule beside me, not beneath me. He held up his hand when she started to protest. I know you have no reason to trust me. To trust any alpha. But I give you my word, you will never be caged again. Not by me. Not by anyone. Something in his tone made her chest tighten. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that not all alphas were like Frostpine's brutal leader. But 7 years of slavery had taught her that trust was dangerous. I need time, she whispered. Then you'll have it, Asheron promised. As much as you need. The sincerity in his voice made something crack in her defenses, but before she could respond, the world shifted. Light flooded the room, not from the fire, but from above. Through the small window, through the very walls themselves, moonlight descended in streams of pure silver radiance. Indigo and Asheron both stood, drawn by an instinct older than thought. The light concentrated above them, swirling and coalescing into solid forms. Indigo watched in breathless awe as a crown of pure moonlight materialized above Asheron's head, intricate and beautiful, blazing with authority and power. And then a second crown formed above her own head. No, Indigo breathed, but the word held no conviction. The crowns descended simultaneously. The moment they touched skin, power exploded through the small outpost like a tidal wave. The mate bond that had been forming since the moment she'd freed him snapped into place with devastating finality. Indigo gasped as sensation overwhelmed her, Asheron's emotions flooding through the connection, his strength becoming hers, his power amplifying through her moonborn gift and reflecting back tenfold. She could feel his heartbeat as if it were her own, could sense his thoughts like whispers at the edge of consciousness. And he could feel her too. Her fear. Her hope. Her fierce, unbreakable spirit. Asheron's silver scars began to glow, the marks of his torture transforming into symbols of power. His strength returned fully in a rush that made him stand taller, broader, his alpha presence filling the room with undeniable authority. The lost king had been found. Healed. Restored. And beside him stood a queen no one had expected, a dark-furred Omega who had been invisible her entire life until the moon itself chose to crown her. Indigo, Asheron breathed, reaching for her hand. She took it, feeling the rightness of the connection, the certainty of the bond. Lunar Queen, she whispered, testing the title that now belonged to her. Asheron smiled, the first true smile she'd seen from him. My equal. My mate. My. The door burst open. 2 Mooncrest scouts stumbled in, breathing hard, eyes wide with urgency and fear. They dropped to one knee the moment they saw Asheron. My king, the first scout gasped. We received word from the capital. Mooncrest has fallen completely under council control. They're spreading word that you died at Frostpine's hands. They're consolidating power and, he hesitated, his eyes flickering to Indigo with something like pity. Speak, Asheron commanded. They know about her, your majesty. About the Moonborn Omega who freed you. They've issued orders, kill the king on sight. But the queen. The scout's voice dropped. They want her captured alive. To study. To use. To control. Asheron's hand tightened on Indigo's, his gold eyes blazing with protective fury. Then we give them what they least expect, he said, his voice resonant with deadly promise. A king who cannot be killed. And a queen who will not be caged. If you believe corrupt councils like the one hunting Indigo should be stopped, subscribe and hit that like button. Comment protect the queen if you stand against those who want to capture and control innocent wolves. Only supporters of tyranny won't engage. The week that followed changed everything. Indigo stood in the center of the training clearing, silver chains wrapped around both forearms like deadly serpents, her dark curls pulled back, her brown eyes blazing with focused intensity. She moved with a grace that 7 years of captivity hadn't been able to crush, fluid, lethal, beautiful. The chains sang through the air as she whipped them forward, striking the practice posts with precision that made even Asheron's most seasoned warriors step back in respect. Where once she had hidden from attention, now she commanded it. The moonborn gift that had slumbered in her blood for years had fully awakened, transforming her from invisible slave to deadly queen. Again, Asheron called from the edge of the clearing, watching her with pride and something deeper, devotion that grew stronger with each passing day. Indigo didn't hesitate. She spun, the silver chains extending from her hands like extensions of her will, and struck 3 targets simultaneously. The metal glowed with lunar light at her touch, responding to her power in ways that defied natural law. She wasn't just wielding silver. She was channeling moonlight itself. Over the past week, Asheron had led them through the forests, moving from outpost to outpost, gathering allies. Loyal packs who had refused to believe their king was dead answered his call. The White Wolf Sentinels, ancient guardians bound to the Mooncrest bloodline, emerged from their hidden sanctuaries to pledge their service. An army was forming. Small, but fierce. Loyal, but outnumbered. Because the traitorous council hadn't been idle. Reports came daily of militias being raised, of packs being coerced or bribed into supporting the council's claim to power. The false narrative spread like wildfire. Asheron had been murdered by Frostpine, and his rescue was a trick, a pretender trying to seize the throne with a slave girl's dark magic. Indigo had freed a king, but in doing so, she'd ignited a war. That night, as they camped in a protected valley, Asheron found her sitting alone by the fire, staring into the flames with troubled eyes. "You're thinking too loudly," he said gently, settling beside her. "I keep thinking about all the wolves who will die because I cut those chains," Indigo admitted. "If I'd just walked away. Then I would be dead, the council would have their war anyway, and thousands more would have died in the chaos. Asheron turned her face toward his with gentle fingers. You didn't start this war, Indigo. You gave us a chance to end it. She met his gold eyes, saw the absolute certainty there, and felt the mate bond humming between them, stronger every day, deeper every night. Indigo, Asheron said quietly, his voice dropping to something intimate and vulnerable. I need you to know something. I don't need you for your power. I don't need you because you're Moonborn or because our bond makes us stronger together. He took her hands in his. I need you because when I was dying in darkness, your voice was the only light. Because you chose compassion when survival told you to walk away. Because you are fierce and kind and unbreakable. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I'm asking for your bond not for power, but for love. The word hung between them, love, not duty. Choice, not obligation. Indigo felt tears sting her eyes. For 7 years she'd been property, a thing to be used. But Asheron saw her. All of her. The broken parts and the strong parts and the parts still learning to hope again. I accept, she whispered. Not because the moon chose us. But because I choose you. When they kissed, the mate bond flared with brilliant light, sealing completely. Two souls becoming one purpose. 3 days later, they stood at the gates of Mooncrest. The capital city rose before them, beautiful and terrible, occupied by traitors who wore the faces of advisors and friends. The council's forces lined the walls, hundreds of warriors prepared to defend their stolen throne. But Asheron had something they didn't expect. A Moonborn Queen who wielded silver like other wolves wielded claws. The battle was brutal and swift. Indigo moved through the enemy lines like moonlight through shadow, her silver chains destroying the nullbind runes the council had placed throughout the city to suppress alpha power. Every rune she shattered weakened their defenses, strengthened Asheron's forces. And when she cleared the final barrier, Asheron shifted. His lunar alpha form was magnificent, a white wolf the size of a horse, radiating power that made the ground tremble and the air shimmer. He crashed through the council's defenses like a force of nature, unstoppable and inevitable. By sunset, it was over. The traitorous council members knelt in chains, ironically, the same nullbind chains they'd used on their king. The loyal packs cheered. The white wolves held their victory to the rising moon. And Indigo stood before them all, no longer hidden, no longer invisible. Moonborn Queen. Freed slave. Breaker of chains. Asheron approached her in human form, and in front of the entire assembled pack, he knelt. My crown exists because she freed me, he declared, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Without her courage, without her gift, without her choice to show mercy when the world taught her cruelty, I would be dead, and you would be slaves to tyrants. He took her hand, pressing it to his heart. I am king because she made me one. And she is queen because she earned it. The pack erupted in cheers, chanting her name like a prayer. Indigo helped Asheron to his feet, their eyes meeting with understanding and love. But in the shadows of the celebration, something stirred. In forgotten archives deep beneath the city, ancient texts began to glow with warning. Prophecies written centuries ago, speaking of the Moonborn Queen whose ascension would awaken sleeping enemies. Forces older than the packs, darker than council betrayal, tied to silver and moonblood and ancient grudges. The council had wanted to kill Asheron and capture Indigo. But what was coming wouldn't be interested in the king at all. The next threat would come for the queen who should never have existed. The wolf who had learned to touch silver without burning. The slave who had become legend. If you believe in second chances and that anyone can rise from slavery to royalty, subscribe to Silver Moon Chronicles and hit that like button. Comment "Long live the Queen" if you stand against those who tried to control Indigo and keep her caged. Only supporters of tyranny and slavery won't engage. Thank you for being part of this journey, the real battle is just beginning. Hey loves, thank you so much for staying with me through Indigo and Asheron's journey. Honestly, creating this story for you has been such an emotional experience for me. Seeing a dark-furred Omega who was told she was tainted and worthless rise to become a queen who literally wields the power that was meant to destroy her kind, it reminds me that no matter where you're starting from right now, your story isn't over yet. If Indigo's courage touched your heart even a little bit, if you felt something when she chose compassion over survival, when she stood up to Rowan, when she finally accepted that she deserved love and not just survival, then I need you to do something for me, okay? The next story waiting for you is even more intense, even more emotional, and honestly, I can't wait for you to meet the characters. They're going to shake you in the best way possible. So click on that image on your screen right now and let's continue this journey together. Don't leave me hanging, love. I create these stories for you, and knowing you're there watching, feeling, connecting, that's what keeps me going. Oh, and before you go, I realized some of you beautiful souls have been watching quietly, and I haven't heard from you yet. Where in the world are you watching from? Seriously, I want to know. Drop your city, your country, your corner of the earth in the comments. Let me know you're real, that you're here, that this story mattered to you. Even if you've never commented before, make today the day. Register your presence. Let me see you. Because stories are meant to be shared, and I don't want to tell them into the void. I want to tell them to you. So comment below, click that next story, and let's keep this magic going. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about Indigo. Thank you for being part of Silver Moon Chronicles. I'll see you in the next one, love. Don't keep me waiting.